First Corinthians 4, verse 1. Let a man so account of us as of the ministers of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. God tells us that if we are going to be used, the one thing we must do is be faithful. I recall as a young man when I first started a job at FedEx Freight, and I showed up and I told him I don't know how to do much of anything. I don't know how to run a forklift. I don't know how to operate that equipment. And what they told me was this: just show up. We'll teach you. We just need you to show up and know that you're going to be here and we can teach you. Something I realized as I worked at that location for many, many years is that one of their biggest problems was people just not showing up for a shift. When you need 5 men to run a shift and only 4 of them show up, it makes things difficult for everybody and it puts the whole chain behind. They just needed me to show up. Time would fail me to tell you of all the opportunities I've had to serve the Lord in a great capacity, not because I was wonderful at a task, but because I was just there, just showing up. I want to share with you 3 things to consider about faithfulness. Let me say this. Number 1, if you won't be faithful, you can't be used. If you won't be faithful, you can't be used. You know, I couldn't tell you how many times as I was pastoring, I was looking for somebody to help me with a job. Maybe it was a nursery worker. Maybe it was a Sunday school. Maybe it was another service opportunity in our church. And I was looking for someone that could help in that capacity. And the very first metric at which I looked was this: are they faithful? Do they show up? If I put them in a position, are they going to be there or am I going to have to worry about covering that position? I couldn't tell you how many times I used a Leatherman as a hammer because I didn't have a hammer on me, but my Leatherman was with me. I couldn't tell you how many times I've used the back end of a knife as a flathead screwdriver because I didn't have a flathead with me, but I had a knife with me. So, what are you saying? I'm saying that people will use what they have. And by the way, God is no different. God will use you if you are available. You know, I used what I had with me. And again, God uses who he has with him. If you won't be faithful, you can't be used. Then secondly, if you won't be faithful, you can't be trusted. Not long ago, I counseled with a couple, and he was infidelitous with his wife. He had an adulterous affair. And this is what she said. She said, every time he's late from work, every time his phone dings, every time that he steps out of the house, I question. Now, let me say this. Probably one of the most damaging things in a marriage is when one spouse steps out. And I'm not pretending that there's no redemption. There can be redemption and there can be reconciliation. But you have to understand there are questions in the back of that person's mind that will never go away. And there are some that wonder why they aren't given bigger service opportunities at church, but they don't even show up faithfully. There are some that wonder why they haven't had the opportunities at their work that they would like, but they haven't been there faithful long enough to gain those opportunities. You see, if you won't be faithful, you can't be trusted. So he said, if you won't be faithful, you can't be used. If you won't be faithful, you can't be trusted. And lastly, let me say this: if you won't be faithful, you can't bear the load that God needs for you to carry. Proverbs 25:19 says, confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. Really, what God is talking about here is pressure. And I know recently in class we talked about hurting from head to toe. But what this verse is in reference to is bearing a load. You wouldn't ask a man with a broken ankle to help you carry a dresser. Why not? Well, his ankle cannot bear the load that needs to be borne in order to carry that dresser. If you had a broken tooth, you wouldn't choose to chew your hard candies with that tooth. You say, why? Because that tooth will break under the pressure. It can't handle the pressure. You see, if you are not faithful, you can't handle the pressure that you need to handle. If you won't be faithful, you're not going to be able to handle the difficulty and the pressure that God needs for you to handle. By the way, that's why some Christians can't handle difficulty. When difficulty comes, they fall out of church. They fall out of their walk with God, they fall out of their service to God. You say, why? Because they aren't faithful to their walk with God. Because they're not faithful to their walk with God, they can't bear the pressure that comes along with serving God. The purpose of this midweek minute is to show some practical reasons why we need to be faithful if we want to be used by God. Let me say this: your very best ability as a Christian is your dependability. You say, I'm tired. Let me encourage you to keep showing up for your family. You say, I'm sick. Let me encourage you to keep showing up to work. You say, I just don't feel good. Let me encourage you to keep showing up to church. You say, I am weary. I'm just worn down. Keep showing up in your prayer time. Just keep showing up. Let me say this: I want everyone that I know and love to experience the joy of a life serving God. But we can't get there if we won't be faithful. Let's just decide to be faithful so that we can enjoy a life serving God in the will of God. We love you, folks. We'll see you tonight at 7.